The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the rusted tin roof of a makeshift bunker somewhere in the Pacific Theater. Sergeant James Harlow crouched behind the sandbags, heart pounding, knowing that every second counted. Enemy troops were closing in, and ammunition was running low. In his hand, he gripped a pistol that most would have dismissed as relic, a weapon nearly 3 decades old, already considered outdated by military brass. But in this moment, as shadows crept closer, that old M1911 was the difference between survival and death. It wasn't supposed to be like this. By the late 1930s, the world had changed. New firearms, sleeker, lighter, faster, had begun to dominate the conversations in military circles. The M1911, designed by John Browning back in 1911, had been revolutionary in its day, but it was a design that many thought belonged in a museum, not in the hands of soldiers facing modern warfare. Its steel frame was heavy. Its mechanisms seemed archaic compared to newer automatic pistols. Yet here it was in Harlow's hands, firing round after 45 ACP round with a reliability that defied logic. The legend of the M1911 had grown quietly, almost unassumingly. In World War I, it had earned respect in the trenches. But by the time whispers of a new global conflict stirred, skepticism about its usefulness had taken hold. Military officials debated endlessly, asking whether a pistol designed in a world of bolt-action rifles and cavalry charges could survive the fast, brutal realities of mechanized war. Some called it a stubborn anachronism, a testament to old thinking in a modernizing army, but soldiers on the ground saw a different truth. The M1911 was simple, rugged, and lethal. In hands like Harlow's, it became more than metal and wood. It became a lifeline. Every shot was precise. Every click of its mechanism was a heartbeat in the dark, a promise that even in chaos, some things were reliable. And that reliability would come to define it. As the enemy drew nearer, Harlow's mind raced. He didn't care about debates in distant offices, about arguments over weight, design, or modernization. He cared about survival, and as he squeezed the trigger, felt the kick of the pistol against his palm. He knew why this outdated piece of machinery had endured, why, despite every doubt, it was about to prove itself on the world stage once again. The irony was stark. A weapon dismissed by experts, mocked for its age, now carried the lives of men on its steel frame. And as the first firefight erupted around him, the M1911 didn't falter. It performed without question, without hesitation. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would see this old pistol issued to hundreds of thousands of soldiers, becoming a symbol of resilience and deadly precision in a war that would engulf the globe. In the shadow of gunfire and rain, the 1911 was no longer outdated, it was indispensable. And its legend, quietly forged in moments like this, was about to explode. Long before the storm of World War II, long before soldiers like Sergeant Harlow would rely on it in the heat of battle, the story of the M1911 began in the mind of one man, John Moses Browning. Browning wasn't just a gunsmith. He was a visionary, a man whose inventions would reshape firearms forever. In the early 1900s, the United States military was searching for a reliable sidearm, a pistol powerful enough to stop an enemy in his tracks, but simple enough for soldiers to trust under the worst conditions. Browning's answer was the design that would become the M1911. Browning's brilliance lay not just in his understanding of mechanics, but in his foresight. He recognized that a soldier's pistol had to survive more than careful drills. It had to endure mud, sand, rain, and blood. It had to function when everything else around it failed. The heart of his design was the 45 ACP cartridge, a round that packed a punch far beyond the lighter calibers common at the time. Each shot carried stopping power that could incapacitate an enemy with fewer bullets, a decisive advantage in the chaos of close combat. But power alone wasn't enough. Browning engineered the M1911 with a single-action semi-automatic operation, meaning that the first pull of the trigger required a cocked hammer. but subsequent shots were fired with precision, speed, and control. The slide locked back after the final round, signaling the soldier that it was time to reload. This might sound simple today, but in an era dominated by revolvers and early automatic pistols, it was revolutionary. Soldiers were given a weapon that combined power, reliability, and control in a package that could be wielded under stress without frequent misfires or mechanical failure. Browning's design didn't stop there. Every component of the M1911 was built for rugged durability. The steel frame could withstand drops, impacts, and exposure to elements that would jam or destroy other pistols. Its magazine capacity of 7 to 8 rounds might seem modest by modern standards, but combined with the stopping power of the 45 round, it was devastatingly effective. And the ergonomics? Browning understood that comfort and control were inseparable from survival. Soldiers could fire for extended periods without losing accuracy, and the pistol felt like an extension of the hand, almost instinctive in operation. When the US military officially adopted the design in 1911, reactions were mixed. Some saw the M1911 as a marvel of modern engineering, a weapon that could give American troops an edge in close-quarters combat. Others were skeptical, questioning whether a large, heavy pistol could be practical on the battlefield. Critics debated everything from its weight to the potential recoil of the 45 ACP round. Yet Browning's design spoke for itself. During rigorous testing, the pistol performed flawlessly, earning praise for reliability unmatched by any contemporary firearm. It could endure thousands of rounds without significant wear, fire repeatedly in extreme heat or freezing cold, and survive conditions that would cripple lesser weapons. Public perception, too, was a mix of awe and curiosity. Newspaper articles described the M1911 as a soldier's last word in handguns, emphasizing both its stopping power and advanced mechanics. It was a pistol designed not just to carry bullets, but to carry trust, the trust of soldiers whose lives depended on it. Browning had not only created a weapon, he had created confidence, a tangible assurance that no matter the chaos of war, this pistol would respond. Decades later, the innovations of Browning's design would prove prescient. When World War II erupted, the same elements that had made the M1911 groundbreaking in 1911, its powerful cartridge, unmatched reliability, and intuitive handling, would ensure that it was not just relevant, but indispensable. The very features that critics once questioned became the reasons soldiers would come to rely on it, often in life-or-death situations that would cement its legendary status. The genius of John Browning's creation was subtle but absolute. Every curve, every mechanism, every choice in the M1911's design was deliberate. It was more than a pistol. It was a blueprint for survival under fire. And as soldiers across the world would soon discover, a weapon that had been considered outdated was about to prove that true innovation never truly ages. The M1911 was ready to step onto the battlefield once again, not as a relic, but as a weapon of choice, trusted by the very men who needed it most. By the time the first bullets of World War II tore through the quiet of dawn, the stage was set. An old design, a pistol born of genius and meticulous engineering, was poised to become one of the most issued and respected sidearms in history. And it all began with a man who refused to settle for anything less than perfection. After the guns fell silent on the battlefields of World War I, the world believed it had witnessed the future of warfare. Armies downsized, technologies evolved, and yet, amid the chatter of modernization, one pistol remained under scrutiny, the M1911. Though it had performed admirably in the mud and chaos of Europe, the years that followed would test not just the weapon's design, but its very survival. The 1920s and 1930s were a time of doubt and debate. Military experts scrutinized every aspect of the M1911, questioning whether a pistol designed in 1911 could truly keep pace with a rapidly changing world. Lighter, faster, and more compact sidearms were emerging from Europe, promising ease of carry and faster rates of fire. Some officers argued that the Army should adopt these new models, believing that the venerable 1911 was too heavy, too cumbersome, and perhaps too old-fashioned for modern combat. Yet, despite these challenges, the M1911 refused to fade quietly into history. Its reputation for durability and stopping power continued to speak for itself. Soldiers who had carried it in the trenches recounted stories of pistols that had survived mud, rain, and repeated abuse, firing without hesitation when revolvers or newer automatics might jam. These first-hand accounts became the lifeline for the 1911's defenders, each story reinforcing the idea that reliability under fire was more valuable than novelty. The U.S. military, however, was far from convinced. Testing protocols in the interwar years were rigorous, pushing firearms to their limits in attempts to discredit them. Pistols were dropped from heights, submerged in water, and fired thousands of times in succession. Every aspect of the M1911 was measured, weighed, and critiqued. Would it fail under extreme cold? Would it jam in sand and dirt? Critics hoped it would falter, paving the way for a modern replacement. Yet time and again, the 1911 endured. Its simple, elegant design allowed for easy disassembly and maintenance in the field, a feature overlooked by some of its newer competitors. Still, the debates raged. Some military officials focused on weight. At over 2.5 pounds with a loaded magazine, the 1911 was heavier than many of its contemporaries. Others worried about the powerful recoil of the .45 ACP round, suggesting it was too punishing for some soldiers. European pistols firing smaller 9mm rounds seemed more manageable, more modern, more efficient. In office buildings and boardrooms far from the battlefield, the 1911 was being quietly judged, its fate uncertain. In response, minor modifications were introduced to extend the pistol's life and adapt it to changing conditions. Magazine improvements, refinements to the safety mechanisms, and adjustments to the sights ensured that the M1911 remained practical and effective. Yet even with these enhancements, the question loomed, would it survive into a new era of warfare? Would soldiers in the next great conflict carry this same weapon, or would it be retired as a relic of the past? Amid the uncertainty, one thing became clear. The soldiers' trust in the M1911 could not be ignored. Letters, reports, and personal testimonies emphasized its unmatched reliability. Officers began to recognize that innovation was not measured solely by new features or lighter frames, but by how a weapon performed under pressure. In many ways, the debates over the pistol's relevance only reinforced its legend. It was a design that refused to fail, even when its critics doubted it most. By the late 1930s, as whispers of another global conflict began to grow louder, the M1911's fate hung in the balance. Military brass deliberated over modern replacements, testing prototypes and examining imported designs. Yet every new contender faltered under the harsh scrutiny the 1911 had already passed decades before. The pistol that some had once called outdated now seemed more prepared than any new design to meet the demands of war. The tension was palpable. Would the 1911 finally be replaced, discarded as an old relic? Or would it rise to meet the challenge of a world on the brink of chaos? Soldiers who had carried it quietly hoped for the latter, instinctively understanding that when survival hinged on speed, reliability, and stopping power, no innovation could outmatch the wisdom built into Browning's masterpiece. As the 1940s dawned, the world moved inexorably toward another war, and in the shadow of this looming conflict, the 1911 remained, tested, doubted, scrutinized, yet unbroken. Its story was far from over. Soon, it would be forced to prove itself not just to skeptical generals, but to soldiers facing an enemy that would push both man and machine to the limits of endurance. The 1911's survival was no longer guaranteed. It would have to earn its place once more, under fire, on the battlefields of a world at war. The roar of battle had returned to the world. By 1941, the United States was thrust into a conflict that spanned continents, jungles, and deserts. Soldiers, young and untested, found themselves in situations where every second, every bullet, and every weapon could mean the difference between life and death. Among the rifles, machine guns, and grenades, one sidearm quietly proved itself time and again: the M1911. In the sweltering jungles of the Pacific, Marines faced conditions that would cripple most weapons. Saltwater, mud, rain, and tropical heat conspired to jam firearms, rust barrels, and wear out mechanisms. Yet the M1911 persisted. Corporal Samuel Green, a Marine stationed on Guadalcanal, later recalled gripping his pistol as enemy soldiers emerged from the dense foliage. "It didn't matter how wet or muddy it was," he said. "That pistol fired every time I pulled the trigger. It never let me down." The heavy .45 ACP rounds, once considered cumbersome, now became a lifeline. Each shot could stop an enemy in their tracks, giving Green and his comrades the critical seconds they needed to survive. Across the globe, in the frostbitten forests of Europe, American paratroopers also relied on the 1911. During the invasion of Normandy, soldiers carried rifles and sidearms into hostile territory, often separated from supply lines or trapped in enemy fire. Lieutenant James Callahan, pinned down during the hedgerow fighting, pulled out his M1911 and defended his position against overwhelming odds. "I've fired rifles before, but the pistol! It felt like it had a will of its own," he later recounted. "It never jammed, never misfired, even after hours in the mud and rain. It was simple but deadly." The M1911's reputation grew with every encounter. Unlike other pistols that might falter under extreme conditions, this century-old design seemed to thrive. Soldiers learned to trust it instinctively. The single-action mechanism allowed for rapid, controlled fire, while the magazine capacity, though modest, was sufficient to give them an edge in sudden firefights. Its ergonomics, honed by decades of refinement, meant that even under stress, soldiers could aim accurately, feel the kick of the powerful .45 round, and fire with confidence. Stories of its performance spread through the ranks like wildfire. In one famous incident during the Philippines campaign, a small squad was ambushed by a force nearly 10 times its size. One soldier, armed only with his M1911 after losing his rifle, held the enemy at bay long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Another account from the island-hopping campaign described a Marine whose pistol had been submerged in water, yet he emerged from the firefight with the weapon still firing reliably, the .45 rounds cutting a path through enemy lines. These were not isolated incidents. They were repeated consistently across oceans and continents. The 1911 was not just surviving, it was excelling. Commanders took note. Reports highlighted its reliability in environments where other weapons would fail, its stopping power that often compensated for limited ammunition, and its intuitive design that allowed soldiers to focus on survival rather than mechanics. By 1943, the M1911 was no longer simply a standard-issue sidearm. It was a symbol of resilience and trust, a weapon that had proven itself in the harshest classrooms of all, battle. Yet the war was far from over, and the challenges were relentless. Soldiers faced ambushes, close-quarters combat, and unexpected firefights where every weapon counted. In these moments, the 1911's durability became legendary. Unlike newer, lighter pistols that sometimes jammed or misfired, the M1911 fired without hesitation, over and over. Its reliability under stress earned it the respect of soldiers and officers alike. By the end of the war, the M1911 had transformed from a weapon dismissed as outdated into a trusted companion for hundreds of thousands of American troops. From the frozen fields of Europe to the sweltering jungles of the Pacific, it had consistently delivered when lives hung in the balance. Soldiers who once doubted its relevance now swore by it, their stories ensuring that the pistol's legacy would endure. The irony was undeniable. A design older than the Great War, criticized for its weight and simplicity, had become one of the most essential tools of the Second World War. And as victory finally approached, the M1911 was not merely a relic of history. It was a hero in its own right, forged in fire and tested by the most unforgiving battlefield conditions imaginable. The legend of John Browning's masterpiece had arrived in full force, and the world would never forget it, even as the 1911 proved itself on battlefields across the globe. Soldiers and armorers quickly realized that survival often required more than raw reliability. It demanded adaptability. While John Browning's original design was near flawless, the realities of World War II pushed the pistol to extremes. Soldiers didn't just carry the M1911. They modified it, improved it, and adapted it to meet conditions that no blueprint could fully anticipate. In the humid jungles of the Pacific, grips were prone to swelling or slipping with moisture and sweat. Marines began adding custom wraps or roughening the original wood to ensure a firm hold during rapid firefights. In Europe, soldiers in freezing conditions found that standard sights could be hard to see, prompting the introduction of brighter, more visible front sights. Even small adjustments, like polishing slides for smoother operation or reinforcing parts with field repairs, made a crucial difference when every shot counted. These modifications weren't made in high-tech laboratories. They were born of necessity, ingenuity, and desperation. A sergeant whose pistol had jammed in the mud of Guadalcanal would quickly learn to adjust the magazine spring or clean a barrel in the middle of combat. Armies recognized these efforts, and wartime armorers began to issue improved parts, incorporating lessons learned directly from soldiers under fire. Over time, these small tweaks enhanced the 1911's reliability and usability, proving that even a decades-old design could evolve to meet the modern demands of war. Perhaps the most inspiring aspect of these innovations was the way they reflected human ingenuity under pressure. Soldiers didn't simply accept the limitations of their tools. They adapted, often improvising with whatever materials were at hand. A piece of wire could repair a spring, sandpaper could improve grip, and careful maintenance became as vital as marksmanship. The 1911 became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of resilience, of human resourcefulness, and of a soldier's determination to survive. By the end of the war, these lessons had been codified. New production models of the M1911 incorporated many of the field modifications, making future pistols even more durable, reliable, and effective. What was once considered outdated had been revitalized through necessity and ingenuity, proving that true design excellence can endure and evolve under the harshest conditions. The legacy of the 1911 was no longer just about what John Browning had created in 1911. It was about how soldiers and armorers had refined and preserved that creation under the relentless pressure of combat. This combination of brilliant design and adaptive innovation ensured that the M1911 would continue to serve long after the guns of World War II fell silent. It was a testament not just to a firearm, but to the men and women who refused to be defeated by circumstance, a weapon shaped by history, battle, and human ingenuity, destined to leave a mark far beyond the battlefield. When the guns fell silent in 1945, the M1911 had already earned a place in history, but its story was far from over. While some weapons were retired or replaced after World War II, the 1911 proved it was more than a relic. It was a tool built to endure, and soldiers continued to rely on it in conflicts that followed. In Korea, harsh winters and rugged terrain tested the mettle of every firearm. Soldiers quickly discovered that the 1911's durability was unmatched. Snow, ice, and mud that could disable other pistols rarely affected Browning's design. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Harrison, recalling his time on the front lines, described the M1911 as a steadfast companion in a harsh land. Even in temperatures that froze rifles' mechanisms, my pistol never failed. Its reputation for reliability carried over from World War II, and soldiers who had trusted it in past conflicts found themselves relying on the same trusted mechanism once more. The Vietnam War presented a different set of challenges. Dense jungles, sweltering heat and constant humidity. Many new firearms faltered under these conditions, yet the 1911 again proved its resilience. Special Forces units in particular came to favor the pistol for covert operations, appreciating its stopping power, simplicity, and the ability to maintain it under adverse conditions. Stories from the field describe soldiers improvising repairs, adding grips, and maintaining their pistols with a care that reflected both necessity and respect for the weapon's proven capabilities. Even as semi-automatic pistols evolved, introducing lighter frames, higher magazine capacities, and modern materials, the 1911 retained its place in elite units. Law enforcement agencies, tactical teams, and military special forces recognized that while newer designs offered certain advantages, nothing could replace the reliability, control, and stopping power of Browning's century-old design. Its weight and recoil, once criticized, were now appreciated as marks of a firearm built to instill confidence in the hands of those who depended on it most. The 1911's longevity is a testament to both its engineering and the human trust it inspires. It is more than a tool. It is a symbol of continuity, a weapon whose lessons have been refined over decades of combat. From the battlefields of Korea and Vietnam to modern-day tactical operations, the M1911 demonstrates that innovation is not always about replacing the old. It is about proving that some designs are timeless. Even today, the 1911 continues to serve, not because it is the newest, lightest, or most advanced pistol, but because it has earned a reputation that transcends time. It stands as a bridge between generations of soldiers, a living reminder that true craftsmanship, adaptability, and reliability can endure far beyond the age in which they were created. The M1911 is not just history. It is a living legacy, a firearm that has shaped the experiences of soldiers across a century, proving again and again that age is no measure of value. Even after more than a century, the M1911 remains a symbol of ingenuity, resilience, and trust. From the mud-soaked jungles of the Pacific to the freezing hedgerows of Europe, from the mountains of Korea to the dense forests of Vietnam, this pistol has proven time and again that true craftsmanship endures. It is a weapon that has shaped history, yet it is not confined to the past. Today, the 1911 continues to capture the hearts of collectors, enthusiasts, and military personnel alike. In shooting ranges and museums, in special forces armories and private collections, the pistol is revered, not as a museum piece, but as a living legacy. Each trigger pull connects the present to the sacrifices, ingenuity, and courage of the soldiers who carried it before. Its design, once questioned, now stands as a testament to timeless engineering and battlefield-tested reliability. For some, it is the feel of the steel frame in their hands, the precise alignment of the sights, or the unmistakable kick of the .45 ACP round. For others, it is the story it carries, a story of survival, adaptation, and unwavering trust. One veteran recounts passing his 1911 to a new recruit, saying simply, "Take care of it. It has saved more lives than I can count." That trust, forged in battle, has transcended generations. The M1911 is more than a firearm. It is a legend. It is proof that true innovation does not fade with age, that reliability and craftsmanship can endure through decades of change, conflict, and doubt. And as long as soldiers and enthusiasts continue to respect its power and history, the 1911 will remain eternal. A reminder that some designs are built not just for their time, but for all time.